Hello, hello. I hope y'all are doing well. I wanted to share a channeled message that's been coming through related to Tiamat. Tiamat and the dragons of the void, I'll call them. This is all about darkness. It's all about the shadow, but not the shadow in the sense of it being negative, okay, or of a lower polarity, but this is the unknown, the abyss. So if we're looking to exit the false matrix simulation, there is a point in which we need to be able to tap into the unknown. As much as we have kind of not so great things to say about the quote unquote matrix or system, like so many things are pre-calculated for us. And there's a weird safety net in that too. When you step out into the unknown and the void space, which is the creation point of all that is, it's really scary. This is something that I walk through with folks a lot. When I do end up doing different coaching journeys with folks, it's usually when there's a time of unknown in their lives. There's usually this moment that a lot of spiritual seekers go through where they just feel like they're wandering in the desert, like kind of like that Jesus allegory where he's like wandering around in the desert or wandering around for 40 days, 40 nights. And it's this time for him to really kind of come into his own. But, or as the story goes anyway, when we think about the spiritual path and all of the things we say goodbye to, right? All of the ways that we reinvent ourselves and that we have many deaths and rebirths. If we're getting into multidimensionality, we're experiencing a lot of, witnessing death, rebirth, that sort of thing. So you need to be really comfortable with this liminal space. This is the symbolism also of the crossroads. And I've been meaning to go into a download about the crossroads, and I will soon, because that's a really important part of galactic consciousness. I would say like one of the first ways to start working with galactic consciousness is to work through the crossroads, but more on that later. I wanted to discuss Tiamat, and Tiamat has been on my mind for quite some time. She's a part of who I am in the sense of the creational dragon mother, the creational, like before there were ley lines, for example, or before there was a planetary grid system, there was Tiamat, okay, the primordial creational energy. And, if you have an aspect of the dark feminine that you're integrating, if you've had issues with the mother, right? If, whether a lot of times that's your mother, or maybe with motherhood in general, if that's been a source of pain for you, you want to look at Tiamat and look at your connection and your positionality to Tiamat. And there's a lot of creation stories out there which talks about the fight between Marduk and Tiamat. And, you could say the quote unquote fallen angelic program, or what's another word for it? The Agent Smiths kind of this false matrix system. A lot of times they are of the lineage of Marduk, which was the patriarchal lineage, the patriarchal lines, the priesthoods that came in to basically put the planet on a sense of lockdown, both mainly physically too, but mainly spiritually and consciousness wise. A lot of that is from the story of Tiamat and Marduk. Okay. And Tiamat has been villainized quite often. Even if I think I had been connecting with Tiamat for a while, but I had to really go through my own shadow healing process and to really make peace with darkness and with trauma, and the ways that it has shown up in my life. This is why people who are waking up, they tend to go through certain periods of trauma during their wake up point, because your foundation needs to be shifted within the grid system. The grid system has you really predictable. The grid system has you with a really identifying with certain identities that really lie outside of the nature of who you are. Okay, so that's something that is going to happen quite often. The way out of that is to remember who you are prior to that particular storyline. Like, what was going on with the planet, or Terra, or Tara, people call it by different names, Gaia, even. It's more about the frequency of the land, though, more than anything. So a lot of us who might feel like we've had more trauma than others, many times it's because you have a really old primordial energy that you're dealing with, and or that you're bringing. Okay, if you have a lot of markings, like a lot of interesting galactic markings around like the galactic center or the super great attractor, like just kind of seeing if you have some planetary conjunctions. So you can check in on the video I did around galactic sovereignty. So I did that on Patreon. So that's something you could check out. But I kind of give some suggestions for different like galactic markings, like ways that you can look into galactic markings. But a lot of people who have that old primordial energy that they're dealing with, like maybe like more serpentine or dragon energy. And, serpentine can also include feline too. Like there is an interesting like relation between felines and reptiles. So they are included. So like the felines are also included in that too. And there's still a lot that I'm learning. But one big thing that I have a pretty deep understanding of is the really pivotal role of the dragons and the serpents on the planet. There's also been a lot of karma there. There's also just been a lot to alchemize. It hasn't all been rainbows and roses. And then the false light program wants to, keep us out of alignment with the true power of our serpentine wisdom. And so there's a lot of distortions that are put into the serpent to keep us out of alignment with like truly knowing and loving ourselves, So that has to do with the storyline of Tiamat. Tiamat was a water serpent. Some might say she was a snake. Some might say she was a dragon. She was kind of within that particular realm. And she had her husband killed. She was betrayed by her children. Okay. So there's that particular energy. If you carry the frequency of Tiamat, you might have had like weird relationships with your family, right? Like where you felt betrayed by your family. This could be a storyline related to Tiamat that you're playing out. Of course, there's also the oppressed feminine as it relates to this, because at the time before the battle of Tiamat and Marduk, it was more of a matrilineal society, and it was after the Tiamat Marduk battle that power got transferred over to the patriarchy. Like that was a moment in time. And as we're hearing this story going around like the rise of the divine feminine and all of what that means, that is the rise of Tiamat, and that is the Earth's or Terra's or Tara's, whatever you're calling the planet, or Gaia's original template before the net system was put around the planet. Okay. So this is The net system is why sometimes it's difficult for us to expand in consciousness in a way that feels affirming in our society. Okay, it's like if your frequency gets a little bit too big, then alarm bells get set off, right? And so that's something that we've been working through. That's why we do all of the deprogramming related to belief systems and etheric implants, is because we are deprogramming ourselves outside of the net. All right. But we also need to look more into the ways that we've been weaved into the net, where our consciousness is retrieving that. And that's a difficult process. Folks who are very much aligned with a particular path, is incarnated on the planet for a particular reason. You have to be so in alignment with who you are. Okay. Because we've had enough illusion. We've had enough brainwashing and mind control, and we're moving into another era. And there's people who are really placed here to support with the ushering in of this new thing. A lot of y'all are healers, a lot of y'all are expanding those gifts even more. A lot, or you're business owners or both. Like, there's a lot happening. And then there's dreams that you have of doing these things. I truly believe, like, the more we can make peace with our galactic lineage, our galactic storyline, the contracts, vows, oaths we made intergalactically, freeing ourselves from that, so we're able to move about the planet with more ease. I think that's like really important right now. But it all goes back to Tiamat, and one thing I kind of found like kind of interesting and a little weird, I like aligning with Earth's content, but they never mentioned Tiamat, which I think is kind of weird. And there's so much talk about the Anunnaki, or they refer to them, I think they call them the Anunnaki in there, but nothing really about Tiamat I've seen, which was always kind of odd to me. I just felt like it was a really foundational part of the Anunnaki sort of storyline. So I find it interesting that it wasn't really mentioned. So I don't really know what to make of that. Ascension Glossary has a lot around Tiamat and the grid system, and it returning back, the Earth returning to its organic grid system, kind of like a honeycomb kind of shape. So, and a lot of that means like the Earth ascending, and then, for certain beings who are prepared to take that ascension journey, making really rapid shifts, changing at really rapid rates to accommodate where the Earth is going. Okay, because the Earth is going, whether or not we go, like we can hitch a ride, or we can ride along with, or, we can be a victim of things happening around us. And so this is like some really interesting Jedi mastery sort of thing that we're moving into, with being able to have such a firm resolve, even when things all around you kind of feel like, people are trying to get you into the doom and gloom and the worry. And then, we're also really connected. We're connected through our own kind of hive as a species. And then of course we're in that net. Okay. And then we're connected through the internet, so there's this whole sort of interesting web work that's happening as it relates to this. We can do it. We're powerful. This is why we activate ourselves, and we take ourselves through all of these like periods of unlocking. The more energy you can retrieve, the more power you can retrieve, the more soul contracts you can let go of, then the more freer you can move around. And the less trauma that you end up enduring. Okay. Because you've already like made peace with those things, and they're not triggers in your reality. There is this like ancient core wound that can sometimes come up as it relates to Tiamat, and particularly women will hold this. It's usually through the maternal line. Your maternal line will have held on to this. So this is why a lot of the womb healing is really important, and also working with your Akashic records through your womb space. So a lot of the meditations, especially like the meditations I recorded about a year ago, I was doing a lot of work with the womb portal and seeing the womb as a portal, and also seeing it as a more interconnected line with the ancestors. So a lot of ancestral clearing was done or can be done through your womb. And so there's a womb chakra med bed meditation that could kind of help process you through it. And, one of my big experiences has been, when I do the womb chakra healing, I haven't done it in a while. So I'm actually nudging myself to take myself through the process again, just because each time I do it, it's so different. The first couple times I did it, there was just so much machinery in my womb space and like weird stuff going on in there. With time, though, I've been able to clear that. There was a lot of entities, ancestral entities that I needed to alchemize and stuff. And I was able to do that through the womb space. And yeah, it just helps to clear out the subconscious of a lot. It's like cleaning a house, so you get like layers of dirt off and the house is more livable. And so that is a really great shamanistic tool to heal through the womb portal. And so it's just something to keep in mind. This is like it's a kind of like a superpower, if you will. If you have a womb, like a physical womb, you're able to physically bring in new life. And regardless of whether or not you have a physical womb, you have a creational portal, like a womb portal within you. Okay. And it's always connected to the mother. So this is why we heal our relationships with our mothers. We might be in an interesting spot where we might not be able to be around our mothers, but we need to make peace with them somehow. Okay. Because if we hold on to that resentment with the mother, like the way we got here, it distorts our reality. It distorts our reality lens a lot. And there's so much programming that's done to distort our connection to motherhood. Okay, there's a very concerted effort to do that. And so, we also don't want to add to that program because we're just going with that artificial program. Okay. And so the more we can heal our relationship with our mothers, and it might not be able to be done face to face, but even with like some of the ancestral healing, like we start clearing that sort of stuff out. We start clearing different karmic storylines and scripts from our subconscious hard drive. Like that's really, really critical. And it helps us to heal that Tiamat storyline, because there is this pattern of betrayal that Tiamat faces with being cast away by her own creations and being betrayed by her own creations. And so this wounded feminine energy. Okay. Now, there's also been the more negative polarity of Tiamat. So that's something that I believe it's Ascension Glossary talks about a lot, is the shadow realms of the Tiamat womb world. So Tiamat, we're dealing a lot with the womb space. It's also the second dimension. So a lot of elementals as well. And the sacral, if we're going based upon the traditional chakras, the second chakra is the sacral, the womb space, which is also the second dimension. So a lot of this stuff, all of these little systems that were made, from like astrology to the chakra system, it was all done in particular ways to like make this matrix system really orderly and for everything to be predictable and to go according to plan. So there's a lot of patterning that you can find with the 12-dimensional time matrix, as well as the astrological wheel, as well as the numerical system. Like a lot of that stuff is meant to go together because that's the way the designers or the programmers of this matrix simulation, that's kind of how they did things. Tiamat has a creational goddess polarity, but also a goddess of destruction as well. So there is that deep polarity integration too, like really learning about your dark feminine and then integrating that polarity. You don't have to be all love and light. Like, you can still, if you kind of are more of like a primordial being, you're going to be more interested in dark stuff, just because, well, I mean, the primordial beings come from the nothingness, the abyss, the 0 point field. Okay. And they're that old. They created so many things. So many things are a part of their creation. Okay. So some of us like have that vibrational frequency within our DNA. Yeah, there are stories about humanity helping to grow the earth in a lot of different ways too, back when we were connected more to our energetic gifts. We're also moving more into that space, but we need to disconnect from a lot of these false matrix systems and align with the organic reality as much as possible to make this so. Okay. And that's what connecting to Tiamat, even the frequency of 222 is related to that as well. But Tiamat can be like really scary. Like, if you just type in the word Tiamat and you just look at pictures, okay, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I want to give one reference to like a Hollywood show. It's called Siren. And there is a villain who is a siren villain, and her name is Tia, short for Tiamat. And so they were very specific with choosing her, and they showed Tiamat way more in the negative polarity. So in this show, this particular siren had been caught by the Russian military and had kind of been like tortured in a lot of ways. She had her voice stolen, like her singing voice stolen and all that kind of stuff. And she wanted to get even, and basically was acting very much in her wounded feminine, and worked to try to destroy humanity through sound. The same thing that they used to destroy her, she wanted to use that to destroy them. And so just somebody who had a vendetta against the human race. And so some people would paint Tiamat in that picture, that, humanity is a result or a byproduct of nemesis, right? Because those are the ones who actually went on to create the human race. And this is where we get into the Anunnaki being like the progenitors, or just like the architects of humanity. And there is a dark side and a light side to integrate as it relates to Tiamat. And there's some really big like dragon serpent energy to be alchemized and transmuted as well. Once you start really connecting in with the earth and grounding in with the earth, you'll also learn more about Tiamat in some kind of way. And you will be many times greeted with a dragon guardian in order to access what you are seeking to access, I guess, in what they would call the Earth Star. Although I don't know if I believe in that. I feel like that's a part of the Merkaba hexing imprisonment system in a lot of ways. Or at least the Earth Star chakra is. Maybe the Earth Star isn't. I don't know. But what I would say is, when I have connected, it hasn't translated at all like what I've read about in the Earth Star chakra. I will say that. It's been very different than the experience they tell you about when you read about the Earth Star chakra. Once you ground, you'll know that you are grounded. Usually when you are approached by a dragon guardian. Okay, there are guardians to each gateway, to each portal. And so if we were to really tap into galactic consciousness, right, doesn't it make sense that we would be greeted by a dragon, some kind of a guardian? Yeah, they're here to teach us. They're with us. And we're able to see them more as we start clearing our energetic field. So they also reside in the astral too. But they go deeper than the astral. So learning more about dragons and working with them, it's kind of different than what they tell you it's going to be like. At least that's been my understanding. But if you think about the dragons that you want to connect with, usually they're really bright and colorful. But the dragon guardian that I've seen, black dragon, I've seen other colors. I've seen many different color dragons. But the one that I can say comes back is the black dragon. And at first I thought that was like more of like a trauma shadow sort of thing. Because usually like they'll tell you that the black dragon represents when you need to like deal with shadow work or karma. And in a way that's actually true. You know, you do, if you have like a dragon, like a connection with the dragon. And we, you know, there are different types of dragons. So people have different types of connections with dragons because of that. But anyway, you kind of more so want to go towards like the colorful iridescent ones, maybe a gold one or a silver one, or yeah. So you usually kind of want to do more of the flashier ones. You know, you don't usually desire to connect with a black dragon. At least that was my experience. But you know, I've always known I've had a really big experience with the black dragon, but I thought it was like, oh, I have so much karma or trauma to transmute. That's not to say I didn't, but black doesn't just mean the shadow. It also means the void. It means the abyss. Okay, so where you know, you're going to go through that kind of energy when you get into the galactic realm. So you need to be comfortable in the dark, in the void. And black doesn't mean shadow. It means like no thingness. This is like, I'll say, that's what I'll say about the Tiamat energy that I've experienced, is it's the void. You don't maybe know what's next, but you know it's going to be okay. That's that kind of energy, you know, that trust, that fundamental trust that things work out, that there's a divine orchestration that you are actually co-creating. Okay. You may not be fully aware or conscious of it, but that it is happening too. Yeah. That is a part of the Tiamat energy. I've seen her as like a black dragon, you know, making peace with with black as being, or seeing black as being more than the manifestation of the shadow. If we're looking at this more from a cosmic aspect, a black hole can represent a portal, can represent a gateway. But you know, you got to be comfortable with that. And there's just so much of the new age that gets us to want to get rid of the darkness. So even if we're doing shadow work, like we're doing shadow work, what to get rid of the shadow? Like, no, it's more about integration, because if you're like so much focusing on the battle between light and dark, then you haven't integrated a portion of yourself. Reconsider your relationship with darkness. Reconsider your relationship with the shadow too. Okay. Reconsider your relationship with how source can appear. Maybe there's been a concerted effort to get us to want to hide from the darkness because maybe there was like something else, like more of a creational mothering aspect of the darkness that they were trying to keep us away from, you know? So, that's the big message that's coming up. And I can also just share that I've been checking in on the different dimensions, like dimensions 0 through 13. And it's usually when you get into the higher dimensions that the most manipulations occur, interestingly enough. I won't get into it too much in this download, but I will say that, you know, when I did readings on dimensions 0 through 13, there are about 3 gateways that are the more beneficial ways to navigate. But I'm not going to share which ones those are, but just know that it's not always just about which one is the highest one. There are other things to consider too. Looking at that and seeing that higher a lot of times was connected to more infiltration. It got me thinking about the void and the abyss and the ways that we have been taught to fear it, and maybe why we've been taught to fear it. Like, there's a lot of propaganda out there about the black dragon. Like, even if you go on Ascension Glossary, and they talk a lot about the AI Black Dragons and the Black Dragon Network. And I actually don't doubt that that's a thing. I'm sure that it is. But I think we focus so much on that because the dragons are black. So that must mean that they're bad. It's a psyop, though, because there's also like guardians that look like the thing that we're taught is the most evil. But like those guardians are within those gateways that are where we might have an opportunity to exit the universal time matrix, like exit the karmic loop of it. So there is a concerted effort, I think, to get us to look one way instead of the other. And this is something that they refer to like as Hegel. I think they call it the Hegelian dialect, where it's like basically you create the problem and the solution in order to control everyone involved. That's the message that I have so far. I think I will be sharing more messages from the consciousness of Tiamat. And this goes against, because I'm usually like really big on, like, I don't want to channel different deities and all that sort of stuff. But I think this is a bit different because this is like a primordial energy. So it's almost like channeling the frequency of the planet. That's the energy, so it's not about one particular entity. It's like a little bit more vast than that. So it's not like, okay, like a goddess. It's a creational energy, actually. So anyway, there's more to say related to Tiamat, but I'm going to stop there for now. Wishing y'all lots of love, joy, and peace until we meet again. Bye.